Ladies and gentlemen, live from Caldwell, Idaho. Well, on my side of the screen, I am joined by Jeff Hampsten. He is a certified hyperbaric technologist, and his side of the screen is in Pocatello. The reason why I have him here today is because I know this is a little bit of a deviation from my normal political rants and things of that nature, but hopefully by the end of the interview, you'll see that it's really not that far off from the things that we should be focusing on anyway, because liberty and freedom and all of those things that we cherish really depend on our health. And we all know about the healthcare industry, and we know about different remedies and things, but I was really impressed and taken back by Jeff's business and what he knows, and something that I had never even heard of before. So I thought I would have him come on and chat with us for about an hour to be able to discuss what hyperbaric oxygen therapy is. So, Jeff, thanks a lot for coming and joining me.
Thank you for inviting me.
I appreciate it. Yeah, me too. So, if you don't mind, Jeff, I like to try to start my interviews off by people getting to know who the person is that I'm talking to. So would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself? Not necessarily about the business yet, just about yourself.
Okay, well, I'm almost an Idaho boy. I moved to Idaho when I was, I think, 13. My folks opened a truck stop, and I worked in that truck stop and have worked in various businesses throughout. I've been involved in business myself for many, many years, basically all my life. I teach scuba diving. I have another business called H&H Dives and Travel. I did a lot of traveling. I've done commercial dive work. So I've been kind of in and around the hyperbaric environments for probably over 40 years. So that's kind of where I got into the hyperbaric oxygen therapy. It was something that we used if we had a diving accident or just in a day-to-day operations. We used hyperbaric chambers when we were doing commercial dive work.
When I first saw you several years ago in Pocatello, of all places, I mean, I was just, I looked down at my sheet and I thought, dive shop in Pocatello, what is going on here? So I had to drive out there, and it looked like an old, kind of an abandoned warehouse kind of a thing and whatever. And I went inside it, and I was surprised what I saw. I mean, you've got this diving facility with all this diving gear, and you got big fish in there too, I guess, right?
Yep, and a 26-foot deep pool for training. So it's set up just specifically for dive training. And we've been there. If you think you were astounded, you should have heard some of the bankers I tried to borrow money from when I built it. They would blink a couple of times across the table and say, "You're going to do a what in Idaho?" And when I'd tell them again, they'd go, "Really? You're nuts."
Well,
And then 10 years later of 12-hour days, 7 days a week, and 10 years of them, and I was doing dive travel all over the world, and I ran over 100 trips in my career with anywhere from 25 to 35 people on each trip. And then when they said, "Well, you just came back from Truck Lagoon in the South Pacific," and I said, "Yeah," and they go, "Wow, you're really lucky." And I went, "When did I shift gears from nuts to lucky?" Because 10 years ago I was nuts.
So, well, I met people when we were talking the first time. I think I was talking to your manager or somebody that was there, and you had somebody from like the Seychelles or somewhere really tropical. And I thought, wow, I mean, these people, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we come here all the time." And I thought, why would somebody from a tropical environment end up in Pocatello? But
well, there's no accounting for people. They just,
do what they do.
What they do.
Well, we should have.
I guess if I hadn't started the Hyperbaric and Wound Care Center, I'd probably be in the Caribbean right now. I've had job offers all over the world to work in dive shops.
Well, we need to talk off camera then, because I'm clearly in the wrong business then.
Clearly.
Anyway, Well, I wanted to. Maybe we could go into that dive shop thing on a completely separate thing. So, you created a business in Pocatello. You have a website called IdahoHyperbarics.com. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And you, so you're, what kind of background did you need to be able to do to get into what you did, or do you have like?
Well, I clear back to I drove ambulance and was an EMT way back in the volunteer ambulance days, and I've been around this, and then I've gone to a lot of training, a lot of seminars, a lot of that kind of thing to get and sat for board certifications and become a wound care specialist and over the years. So I've been doing it. I've been doing the wound care part of it for about 22 years, 21, 22 years. The way that we came about becoming one is I had a hyperbaric chamber for my diving business, and I trained a doctor. His name was Dr. Michael Baker. And during the course of his training, we discussed this. It was an internet was just coming in, and I said, they're doing all kinds of stuff that's really cool with hyperbaric chambers all over the world. And Dr. Baker said, well, I've never really learned much about it in medical school and he's right, they don't really cover it much in medical schools in the United States, even though it's utilized in all over the world. But he said, but I'll do a little research. And he was a very, very intelligent man. And he went out, and a couple of weeks later, he came back to me and he said, wow, we've got to put this chamber into use. He said, they're doing all kinds of diabetic foot wounds and all kinds of stuff that these things will fix. And we ought to get it to work. So I bought into a building that his family practice group was putting in. I bought the last 1,300 square feet of the building and bought into the LLC, and we put the first commercial hyperbaric chamber for medical use into the state of Idaho and about 99. So that I can say that basically I've been at this since before the turn of the century.
So this is your website. Or is that a full shot?
Yep, seems to be.
That's all you see on there then?
Yep.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure it was right. And so this thing is quite it's really quite amazing. So you did I guess I'm really kind of, when we were talking, I mean, if you can look at that picture right there, it's absolutely huge. So I mean, what made you decide to invest and purchase a building, rip out the side like you were telling me, and rip out the bottom to be able to install this submarine-sized structure in this thing before you decided to close the building up in Pocatello of all places? I mean, look at that thing. So tell us about the construction of this thing and how you ended up putting it.
Well, it's actually probably the largest privately owned chamber in the United States. And I'd say privately owned. There are some that are about the same size, perhaps even a little bigger, that belong to hospitals and university medical centers and that sort of thing. But as far as a privately owned one, this is probably the largest one in the country. I do have a colleague in Raleigh, North Carolina, that has about the same capacity, but he has it in two chambers. He has two 12-place chambers instead of one 22-place one. So it's the name of his company is Extavita, EXTAVITA, I think. It's Extavita, and he's in Raleigh, North Carolina. If people are seeing this from the other side of the world and they want to find a place that is a privately owned and accepts private pay patients like we do, you could go to Extavita. Majority of the rest of the chambers in the country, or even in hospitals, are what they call monoplace chambers for the most part, which is a single person at a time chamber. They do the same thing, but they just do it a little bit differently. So.
Well, so that kind of so I guess I should probably let people know that are just chiming in. I am with Jeff Hampsten from Pocatello. His business is Idaho Hyperbarics. We're talking about hyperbaric oxygen therapy. On the screen, you can see his website, and of course, he and I. And so, if you could do us a favor, Jeff, can you tell us what Hyperbarics is?
Mm-hmm. Well, hyperbaric oxygen therapy has been called a treatment for wounds within the body of any location and any duration. I think that's a pretty big statement, but I think hyperbarics holds up to that. The way hyperbarics, the physics behind hyperbarics is actually pretty straightforward. Easy way to explain it would be like a bottle of pop. When you have pressure on a bottle of pop or a carbonated beverage, when you have pressure on there, the dissolved gas stays in solution in the liquid. Okay, so the pressure is allowing the liquid to hold in solution a lot more dissolved gas. Our bodies are liquid as well. So when we go into a higher pressure environment and we breathe oxygen, whatever we breathe, if you breathe air, you still take up more of it. But the biggest thing that happens is instead of just carrying oxygen on the hemoglobin like you normally do, it actually dissolves the oxygen into the plasma, and in turn it goes into solution in lymphatic fluid, intercellular spaces. It just dissolves into our body. And it's not, I hear people say, well, it forces oxygen into the tissues. It doesn't force it, it allows it to pick it up and carry it into the tissues. So we get oxygen in lymphatic fluid, we get oxygen basically throughout our body. Oxygen is paramount to healing. If you don't have adequate oxygen, you're not going to heal. And a good example of that is the poor circulation in a diabetic's foot. They have poor circulation, they get a wound on the foot, and it becomes what is known as a chronic ischemic wound. And ischemia just means it's lacking enough oxygen. So when you put somebody with that type of wound into a hyperbaric chamber, the extra oxygen that's dissolved into their tissues presents in those tissues that are lacking oxygen, and it changes the complexion of the wound from an ischemic wound to one that has adequate oxygen to begin to heal. It triggers all kinds of things. It triggers a process called angiogenesis, which is a regrowth of new blood vessels. Under normal circumstances, if you have a wound on your arm, in the wound, you have low oxygen because you've damaged the blood vessels in the wound. But immediately surrounding it, you have normal oxygenation, and your body sees that gradient, and it fires up the leukocytes, and they start fighting bacteria, and the cytokines are making things, and all kinds of stuff is going on, and your body heals the wound. Well, when it balances that over, that it's already regrown new capillary beds into the injured area, and it balances the oxygen, and the body goes, okay, the wound is fixed, and the process stops. So when you've got lousy circulation in your foot, you've got your whole foot is low in oxygen. So when you get a wound in it, the body doesn't see it because there's no gradient of oxygen. You've got poor oxygenation in the wound, but you've got poor oxygenation around the edges as well. So by correcting that using hyperbarics, you can get a chronic ischemic wound to heal. Brain injuries are one of the things that we also treat, although they're still denying that that's what's happening, but we've seen it enough now that we're pretty darn sure that's what's happening. But if you think about it, the brain doesn't have an excess of oxygen most of the time anyway. It actually utilizes most of the oxygen you can pump to it just to operate from all the time. I mean, it uses 25% or so of our cardiac output, but at that, it can only run 5 to 10% of it at any given time. So about the only time that a brain injury heals is when we're sleeping. So the extra oxygen is available for healing the brain, and brains do heal. That's a common misconception, is that, oh, if you have a brain injury, there's nothing you can do about it. You're just stuck with it. That's the way you're gonna be from now on. I don't think so.
Some of these things you're talking about are really revolutionary for people that are that have been told only about the mainstream or the Western medicine their whole life. I mean, it almost sounds like you're talking about, I mean, without saying it, because it's illegal, but saying that you could actually cure people, or actually, I don't even know the word to say.
I'll use the word improve.
Yes.
How about that?
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
We can definitely improve the most of the time brain injuries. So, and of course, the sooner we get them, the better it is. But we've actually had resolution of symptoms in soldier that still had PTS from the Second World War. His wife had not been able to sleep with him for many years because he kicked at night. And he fell asleep one time on the table when we were doing a wound care on his legs. And when he woke up, actually the nurse said, well, he's really got restless legs. And I said, I don't think so. I think he's running. And when he woke up, I got to talking to him, and he had made 3 landings in the South Pacific in World War II. And I'm kind of a military history buff, and I asked him what outfit he was in, and I asked him specifically the 3 Marine outfits that I knew were there. And he said, how'd you know that? And I said, well, I've been on one of the places that you landed, Peleliu. And he said, oh, that was a shitty campaign. And I said, must have been. It kind of looked like it. And he said, well, that's, and so we just became pretty good friends. And after we healed up the diabetic ulcers on his legs, I was taking the last photographs of the healed wounds. And he said, I just want you to know that I don't know exactly what happened, but your magic machine seems to have healed up my problem, which is what he called his PTS. Mm-hmm. And he said, my wife's sleeping with me again for the first time in 54 years or whatever. And so we've had effect on people 50 years after the fact of having head injuries. And I mean, everybody that's in a combat theater, whether they realize it or not, they may not get an impact, or they may not get specifically their vehicle blown up or whatever, but their brain is under constant assault from shockwaves. So,
well, I guess
just heavy weapons.
It's kind of funny because my next question is what can hyperbaric therapy do that other services can't? I mean, the only 2 therapies I know, I mean, aside from standalone, issues, is like Western medicine. We can cut it out, or we can give you meds, or you can go to a homeopath or a naturopath, and they could give you chelation therapy, or bombard your body with vitamins. This sounds like it's this is not even, it sounds like it's not even close to any of those things, and it sounds like it's got more, from what you're saying and from what I've seen from the presentations you've showed me, you've had far more success, I think, with a lot of the things that you treat than even naturopathic doctors. Does that seem right?
Yes.
I mean, I don't want to have any.
If you look at the website treatnow.org, mm-hmm. that site is primarily it's just people who have recovered or have made great strides in recovering from post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injuries of all kinds. There's General Manny on there. He was basically he was blown up. He was in Iraq, I believe, and when he got home, his wife had to just take him around. His wife and he presented at a conference that I was at, and his wife said she basically had a 240-pound kid that she had to take around with her, because if he got lost in the grocery store because she went down a different aisle, he'd just stand there and yell her name until she would come back and get him. And they put him through a treatment regimen. He got his job back as a federal judge. It's like nothing else out there.
Wow.
We have at this point, through treatnow.org and several other basically fairly loose organizations of people who have been treating veterans for many years, we have somewhere over 6,000 veterans that we've treated. And at the last juncture, nobody knows of anyone who has committed suicide post-treatment. If they've received hyperbaric treatment, of those 6,000 people, none of them have committed suicide.
Yeah,
nobody knows of anybody that has.
I saw the link that you had shared with me about the success of the veterans that you guys have cared for. When it said like 5,000 or something like that, it would have been interesting to be able to find out how many of them were successfully treated. And I'm from what it sounds like and what I've learned from you is that if the number of successful vets were treated, then the number is probably the same number as the amount of vets that actually came to see you, which means 100% success rate.
I don't think we're at 100%, but I think we're at a strong 85 to 90.
I don't know.
That we have very profound training, very profound improvements. And by that, it's what's interesting is the veteran themselves usually don't think that they've done much. They'll admit that they're sleeping better, that they'll go, I'm not as jumpy as I was, and I'm not hyper vigilant and those kinds of things. Otherwise I don't feel too much different. And you send them home after treatment, and 2 days later you get a phone call and staff says, "Hey Jeff, Dan's wife's on the phone." And you pick up the phone and go, "Hello?" And she goes, "I just want to thank you for sending me my husband back, because it's a different man than I sent to you."
Wow.
And I've heard that now a number of times, not just once or twice, but from spouses. The people that surround them recognize it more so than the individual that's been injured. Yeah. And I think it goes back with that. If you get a brain injury or a head injury, almost without fail, somewhere along the line, somebody tells you, well, that's just the new you. You just have to get used to the new you, because you're never going to get any better.
Right.
I ran into at a conference a little girl who at the time I believe was 4, maybe 5, and she was scooting around with a little walker thing, talking to everybody. She was just cute as a bug's ear, and her parents presented, and they were told a number of times after she had come a near drowning. She had drowned. She'd actually been dead. Clinically dead for about 2 hours, I believe. And the parents were told simply that you're never going to get your little girl back. She's gone. You just as well let her go. Let her organs be good for
Wow.
somebody else. And you're just never going to get any help. And her parents just refused to give up. And they finally found somebody to treat her with hyperbarics. And she, like I said, she was up running around.
That's an amazing story.
Yeah. And I can't remember her name. Brianna, I think, was her name. You can find her on the internet. But her parents just refused to cave in to the idea that just pull the plug and let her go. But that's what we're commonly told about head injuries. It's pretty crazy. We use some testing that's pretty interesting stuff. This one test that we use actually gives you scores in mood scores, and it scores everything in 100. The top score is 100. This particular person, their anger score when we started with them was 100. Their anxiety was 83. Their depression was 86. Their fatigue was 75. Their happiness was 3. Their restlessness was 94, and their vigor was 14. After 40 treatments, their anger is 0, their anxiety is 0, their depression is 0, their fatigue is 3, their happiness is 100, their restlessness is 0, and their vigor is 97.
After how many treatments?
40.
Oh my gosh. I need to go.
Well, I can tell you, I can find a concussion or 2 or 3 in almost everybody.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, it's just we live our life. That's that book right there that says Oxygen in the Brain, The Journey of Our Lifetime. That was written by a fellow named Dr. Philip James. And he points out in there, he is responsible pretty well for getting the people in the medical system in England to accept hyperbarics for the treatment of multiple sclerosis.
I see.
And they've had a great deal of success doing that.
Wow.
And
well,
he maintains that multiple sclerosis is in many cases can be tied back to physical trauma to the brain.
Wow. Well, this is actually the fastest interview I've ever had. We're at 6:56 now, so we're 4 minutes before the hour, so that'll be about a half hour. I don't want to finish yet, so I'm going to continue to go on for probably another 15 minutes or so. If you want to catch up and you want to go into more detail again, I'd love to do that for you if possible. So I want to try to run through some of these questions, Jeff, if that's okay.
Sure.
So I've been to other naturopath places, homeopathic places. I've even heard that hospitals actually have these. So don't other places offer this therapy or have the ability to do this therapy? And do they do it? And if they don't, why don't they?
In the United States, we have 2 schools, if you will. One school treats only the things that Medicare will cover. And if Medicare covers it, and there's 14 indications that Medicare will cover, that they've admitted that there's nothing else that will do as well as hyperbarics for those 14 indications. And then there's another school, and then the only ones that you can get paid for are those on that 14 indication list. There are things that are paid for by most insurance companies, and we treat all 14 of those indications as well. But then there's a whole nother side of it that is things like traumatic brain injury, like Parkinson's, like all of the thing. If you look at Muhammad Ali, for instance, I had an occasion to speak to Joe Namath at a convention or at a deal once, and Joe, I asked him really how bad he was when he first started, and he said, "Well, I was kind of on the same path as Muhammad Ali." He said, "I think I was dying." And I said, "How about now after 100 treatments?" And he said, "I haven't felt this good in 40 years.
Wow.
So it's really, truly an amazing treatment. But there again, if you're a hospital and you're not going to get paid, $400 or $500, $2,000 for a hyperbaric treatment, they won't do it. They won't do anything that they're not going to get paid for. They just simply won't cover any of the other indications that are being covered oftentimes in many countries in the world. Russia's been treating traumatic brain injury in hyperbaric chambers for probably 60 or 70 years at least.
Well, if I had to throw my political conjecture, it would be to follow the money. So,
you think?
so Jeff, so what makes What makes Idaho Hyperbarics different than maybe other places that might have the same therapy?
Well, we do accept, if there's a reason to treat you, we'll treat you. We don't treat because you don't like the wrinkles on your chin. If you can't, but the thing is, you can find, uh, really, you can find injury in brain injury in almost everybody. Car wrecks, falling off skateboards when you were a kid, falling off retaining walls, landing on your head on the sidewalk. I've heard it all,
All right.
And ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. Think about Lou Gehrig's disease for a minute. Lou Gehrig was a first baseman, I believe, and he stopped a lot of elbows and a lot of knees and a lot of baseballs with his head. And later in his life, when they said, well, Lou, we don't have any idea what's really wrong with you, but we're going to name it after you. That's how Lou Gehrig got its name.
Wow.
But I maintain that it was probably the man had so many head injuries that he, if you think about it, there's nothing in your body that your brain won't run.
Yeah.
Everything.
Well, you guys have these cool little apartments too that I showed up on the screen. I thought that was a really cool. So you have this parking lot, and you have this, your doctor's office and whatnot, and then across the parking lot, you've got these cool little apartments. And so
Right.
tell us about those.
Well, those are for anyone coming in from out of town. We have a place for you to stay. They're all fully accessible. They're very reasonably priced. They've got full kitchens in them, so you can cook your own food. Saves you a lot to stay in those rather than staying in a hotel or motel while you're here. So we have those available as well. Yeah. The other thing that's kind of unusual about us, as far as a privately owned facility, is we have full-time physician coverage. We have a physician here, not just on staff, but actually physically in the building whenever we're doing treatments.
Wow. So I have to ask. So, you said earlier that you had arguably one of the largest hyperbaric chambers in the country. So I'm assuming size does matter. And so there must have been, sorry, but there must have been a reason for you to be able to maybe have the largest chamber, or maybe you just ended up with it. I hardly believe. But what is a larger chamber?
I think that the banker that said I was nuts probably had something.
Is there a benefit though to having a bigger chamber than, let's say, one of those monopods?
Just the ability to, it's much more comfortable. People can read in it, so it's just a lot more comfortable. The other part of it is it is actually, we put people in it and we pressurize the chamber with air instead of pressurizing it with oxygen, which is, just a little safer way to go about it. Not that safety has ever been much of an issue with hyperbarics. It's probably one of the safest treatments you can get. People go to my site and look at that young man named Kurt Allen right there. Dr. Hartz treated him. It's an amazing piece of film. His mother was told the same basic thing: go home and take care of him until he dies, because that's all he's ever going to be. And he's I think he's an assistant manager at Walmart now, so owns his own home. It's pretty wild.
Well, we actually have the ability to play videos, so maybe we get to do that in a future video. So this one's the inside for people that are viewing that are interested in what the inside of the hyperbarics chamber looks like.
Right.
And so I guess the other thing to have a big one like that is if you've got people in there, at least you can converse, right? Do you have anything on your
Yes.
head or like a?
Yes, you have a clear plastic hood that the oxygen is circulating through. Extra oxygen is being dumped overboard, but you can talk through it. We have people play chess and Yahtzee and card games, and we have all kinds of ways that people pass the time.
Can you play with your phone in there too?
No,
Okay.
we don't put the phone in there. Simply reason it's got a battery in it.
Oh yeah, that's
Just there's no sense in
well,
there's
and
no sense
Wi-Fi.
in
It's not real healthy either. So yeah, that's cool. Wow. So so I guess you had talked about some of the successes that you've had, and I didn't know if you wanted to um, maybe give us a couple of examples of that. You've got what is his name, Curtis? You have there,
Yeah,
and
he was Dr. Harch's patient at Louisiana State University Medical Center.
is he the one that was in the car accident that you're telling me
Yes,
about? And
yes,
he came on the table and he couldn't lift his head. He couldn't lift his.
yep,
He was in a
that's
little
him.
ball, right?
Yep.
And now he's a manager at Walmart. I don't know of any Western. I'm sorry about Western medicine, but I don't know that I've the things that you have shared with me. I have never seen from any other type of therapy. So this is really why I wanted to be able to get on here. And I know that people are probably going, "Wow, what's Tom doing?" Interviewing something having to do with healthcare. But man,
It's
for anybody that
one of
watches
the
it,
things that, I mean, our freedoms to look for and to have available to us different types of healthcare than the system wants us to have is just one more of our freedoms that we've given away. We've allowed the system to tell us that, oh, the only way to do it is this way. And again, follow the money. I mean,
yeah,
I've had one veteran come in that one of the pills that he was on that the VA had given him, he came in for depression and suicidal. His commanding officer wanted us to treat him because the kid had called his commanding officer up and told him he was going to kill himself.
hmm
And they were both out of the military by that point. And he called me and asked if I could treat him. And one of the medications that he's on, I think, had like a 61% side effect rate and like a 14% efficacy rate. And and the top three side effects were homicidal and suicidal ideations and depression. And they gave it to a guy that had suicidal and homicidal, and we can't figure out why 22 or 25 of them a day are killing themselves.
I'd rather take depression medication authorized by the FDA that causes suicidal tendencies, wouldn't you?
Oh yeah, that's a lot better than going to a hyperbaric chamber and
That's-
getting your brain squared away.
well, so let me ask you something, Jeff. What can hyperbaric oxygen therapy do for COVID-19? Since COVID-19 is all the rage, right? Everybody's so fearful about it.
Well, so far, everybody that's used it on it, it's been very successful as a treatment. We've had people in Louisiana have used it with great success. There's people in, I think Italy used it. China's used it. I mean, things like they had, I don't know, I think one of them was just 5 people, but all 5 of them came off the problem and all recovered. Had another one, I think there was 35 in that guy's study, and it wasn't really a study. It was just a case. He just said he gave him the option of either going on the ventilator
Mhm.
or doing hyperbarics, and all 35 of them recovered. And these people were going on ventilators that at that time had something like an 85% mortality rate.
Right, for
And
sure.
what's happening, the people, what we're seeing, I think, is that the COVID seems to mimic both high altitude sickness and carbon monoxide poisoning, in that it damages the heme in the red blood cell. And one of the things that happens is it breaks that heme and it releases an ion of iron, and the ion of iron is causing, I believe it's called hemochromatosis, but it's just overloads your liver with iron, and you can't carry enough oxygen to your tissues. So what is happening is people are going what is globally hypoxic, just like they do in a carbon monoxide poisoning. And so when you can't carry the oxygen, you can't recover from the damn stuff. And like high altitude sickness, it causes fluid in their lungs, and when they put the ventilators on there, the settings are such that they're trying to inflate the lung, but it's partially filled with liquid, which doesn't compress. So what it winds up doing is it literally tears up the alveoli. It breaks it tears the alveoli wall. And that's why they have such a high mortality rate. But if you can keep the guy alive and correct the problem and either kill or whatever you do to the virus, it seems to stop replicating when you get them in high oxygen content. So the people have a chance to recover. Awesome. It's pretty amazing stuff. Actually, it was used in 1914, 1913, long in there, whenever the Spanish flu pandemic, it was used, hyperbarics was used very successfully on the Spanish flu.
I bet it would work better than cloth masks. Sorry.
Very possible.
So, ladies,
I think some of those cloth masks that I've seen are kind of like putting up a chain link fence to keep mosquitoes out.
They really are. So, everybody, we're here with Jeff Hampsten. He's the hyperbaric expert and certified hyperbaric technologist, talking about hyperbaric oxygen therapy and why it's so good for you and why you need to know about what it is, which is why I'm doing this. So, Jeff, what is your desired goal for what you're doing?
Hopefully to bring hyperbaric medicine to the United States with some degree of acceptance. The problem is that none of the doctors, or not none of the doctors, but most of the doctors in this country don't receive any training on it when they go to medical school. So they're if they didn't learn it then, they don't believe that it could be true or real.
That's
I think it was Samuel Clemens that said that it's a lot easier to fool people than it is to convince them they've been fooled. And I think that's kind of the way hyperbarics is. People have been told that it doesn't do anything and it's expensive and it doesn't work and all of that. And so they don't want to hear any more than that. They don't want to change. They don't seem to be accepting when they should really look, because it makes, it would make an awful lot of doctors even better doctors than they are, if they would treat people, for instance, after surgeries and pre-surgeries and post-surgically. I went to New Orleans to a hyperbaric medicine conference. What would it have been? 17 and 5 is what? 22 days after 5.5 hours of open heart surgery. And I just went in the chamber after it was over with, and I was pretty well completely healed up. I saw doctors that I've known for years, and they'd go, "Wow, you've lost a lot of weight." And I get 5 hours open heart surgery will do that to you. They went, "When did you have that?" I said, 3 weeks ago. And they'd go, "No, you can't be, you couldn't be here 3 weeks ago. What are you talking about?"
So how, why do you think it's been difficult to inform people about this? Is it because, well, maybe I won't even try to put anything into your mind, because obviously there are obstacles in trying to inform people, but what really is, I guess, that goes along with, for people that are watching this or start learning about oxygen therapy, what can we do to be able to help you become more successful in helping us?
Well, it seems like this Facebook thing that everybody else can do that I don't. Just word of mouth is the best advertising I've found, and I will talk to any kind of group, anybody that wants to invite me to a luncheon or to a dinner meeting or to anything. If we ever get back to where we're having face-to-face meetings with people again, the lions and tigers and Rotarians all start going back to having meetings, why I'd be more than happy to be a speaker at any of them. As you can tell, you burned the first 45 minutes, and like you said, I've just barely scratched the surface. I'm just getting warmed up. If you want to make this go till 8:30 or 9, that's no problem.
Well, unfortunately, I've got another meeting at 7:30 that I need to attend, so I can go that far.
I knew that.
But I definitely don't have, since I don't know anything about hyperbarics and you don't know anything about doing what I'm doing, then I can at least, for what it's worth in my small circle of influence, I'm certainly willing and able to help you in this way, however I can. So let me ask you something, Jeff. You mentioned something about side effects early on, and I just happened to include that in my line of questioning. Are there side effects to this?
Not to speak of. If you don't equalize your middle ears as you pressurize, it makes your middle ear hurt or your sinuses.
So is that like diving diving where you have to hold you?
It's exactly like diving. That's exactly what most people call hyperbarics. It's a dive. And it's the same exact process. You equalize just like you do when you're going scuba diving.
Is it as uncomfortable as it is for people that are just learning to dive?
It is. It's not uncomfortable. It's easy. I teach people all the time to equalize, and if you do it as you change the pressure, it's not even uncomfortable. You just have to make sure that you're staying equalized. And if you have problems or something, then you just tell us, and we stop pressurization until you're comfortable again. Oh. So it's a very comfortable, pain-free way to treat. As far as any other side effects, some people's vision will change, but it changes back. It's a transient change. Not everybody does it. Some people's vision gets better. Some people's vision will get worse. But 2 months later, if your vision got better, don't throw your glasses away because it'll probably go back where it was.
Oh, well, because my next question was, if when you're going in for, cancer or, some sort of respiratory illness or this kid that got in a car wreck or whatever, I'm sure that there are other benefits that will happen simultaneously that you're not even aware of because it's like a whole body experience, right?
Correct.
It's not like you're taking pills.
It's releasing. One of the things it does is it releases about 8 to 15 fold the number of stem and progenitor cells within our body. That was a study by Stephen Tom at University of Pennsylvania. There was one. This is one that'll. There was a guy. I think his name is Bareem, but he wrote a paper called "Life Without Blood." You can look it up. And he actually took pigs and removed their hemoglobin and kept them alive with basically saline solution in their body for blood. He kept them alive in a hyperbaric chamber until they started regenerating their own blood. Whereupon he took that back out and put their blood back in them, and the pigs wandered off to become bacon, I suppose. But they were none the worse for the wear for having been without their blood for a couple, 3 days. So it's absolute magic on carbon monoxide poisoning. It's just crazy because if you can get them in here with their heart still beating, it'll pull them out of it. It's just amazing.
Well, so are there? You don't really need to be ill though to receive this treatment, right? It wouldn't sound like.
Not really, no.
Because everybody's got something anyway. They're just not aware of it. So you could literally just prolong what it is that you don't know from getting to you the way that it would if you didn't have the therapy.
Right.
So how do the costs compare with similar therapies? When you were telling me this, I found this kind of amazing.
Well, if your self-pay costs, I mean, we're very competitive. I would say we're probably about half what the national average for self-pay hyperbarics would be in our pricing. You can do, well, if you wanted to do a regimen of 40 treatments for brain injury, you're looking at about $5,000. So,
and you'll feel better than you have in 40 years, probably.
And it's, I just got a flyer from an outfit down in Utah somewhere for a week. Their full bore thing where they use magnetic things, and some of that stuff I think probably has a benefit. They use different therapies, and they look at your brain with a I think it's MRI. They look at your brain before and after and show you the differences. And for that week, it only costs $18,000. So I think for very provable treatment, I think we're in pretty reasonable place.
So is it fair to even ask how you're treated by the medical industry, or do they just pretend that you don't exist?
Yes.
Latter. I thought that were the truth. Do you receive maybe referrals from homeopathic or naturopathic doctors?
We receive some referrals from just regular physicians. Podiatrists, we hear a lot from podiatrists as far as foot wounds, and that is one of the covered indications. So their insurance will cover it. It's all around a good, for diabetic foot ulcers, it's great. Like I said, we get referrals from a number of different types of doctors. We've actually even had a few for head injuries that were referred to us by the state insurance fund for workman's comp. They're interested in the individual getting their ability to go back to work back. And so they're willing to give it a try. And so far it's been pretty effective.
This sounds like a lot like the way chiropractors were treated 20 years ago,
yes,
where people, just this, America is just the land of the free, right? Where people have the entrepreneurial spirit and they have the ability to do all this stuff, but yet we say no to everything that we're completely unfamiliar with. It's really kind of ironic to me.
Yep.
Especially when you have the track record that you do, and you've definitely put your reputation and your finances from the looks of the size of that thing and what you've done behind it. So there really must be, that's really quite a sacrifice to make to try to bring people therapy that they couldn't otherwise find. So I'm really pleased that you're there. I'm pleased that I've gotten to know you and your business and things like that. And I hope that good things for for your business, and if I can do anything to be able to help people become freer and become healthier, and to be able to help friends in the process, it's a great blessing for me. So again, as we wrap up here, what can we do? What can the viewers do to be able to help you, help us? Just social media, anything we can do.
Spread the word, whatever.
Are there key websites? Are there key websites that
treatnow.org for head injuries? That it's a very good one. Extivita is a good one.
Can you spell that?
Let's see. EXTIVITA.
Extivita, is that .com or .org?
It's just extivita.org.
Okay. Anything else?
Those two are, there's another, you can look up Eddie Zant in Florida. Eddie's been in the business, Dr. Eddie Zant. He's been in the business for years. There's a place you can look up in...
how do you spell his name?
Zant, Z-A-N-T.
Z-A-N-T, okay. Good.
There's a place in North Dakota, in Fargo, that's run by Dr. Dunham. She's been doing a lot of stuff with kids with sports injuries. She's treating kids with sports injuries sometimes 2 to 5 times, and they're not having post-concussive syndrome problems. They go back to school Monday or Tuesday, and they don't have the headaches. They don't have and she's so far is pretty close to 100%.
Wow.
It's
So do you have, and you've got some books behind you there. Are there a
right.
couple of those that resources that you want to mention?
Well, that one it would be from Best Publishing Company. That would be Oxygen in the Brain: The Journey of Our Lifetime by Dr. Philip James.
Okay.
That's an excellent book.
Okay.
All the rest of them, there's all kinds. There's hundreds of books out there from the practice. Thing people don't quite understand. Everybody says, "Oh, this is cutting edge. This is new stuff," and it's new stuff, but it's 300 years old.
Yeah.
So it's been around for a long, long time.
And so your website is IdahoHyperbarics.com. You're also on Facebook at Idaho Hyperbarics.
Yes.
And so people can contact you there and through Messenger or contact you by phone or whatever.
By phone. Yep.
And also,
Wherever.
if people are interested in diving opportunities, they can. Does that H&H Dive and Travel in Pocatello?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
Don't have much for a website because I'm still of the opinion that old guys like me shouldn't have to mess with computers. But
you get the young folks to do it. They're on it. Plus, some of the websites are pretty good to do on your own anymore. They're not too complicated, so that's always good. Well,
I would need not too complicated.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you get by with a little help from your friends. So, if you're not one of those that doesn't have any, then you're in pretty good shape. So, well, Jeff, I appreciate your time. We're about out of time here. And I'm hoping that you enjoyed it. I definitely enjoyed it. I learned a lot, and hopefully we have some people that are interested in what's going on from this. And I'll be posting this in some other media platforms, YouTube and Brighteon, where Mike Adams is and currently is banned, by the way. So I look forward to anything that you've got in the future. So I appreciate your time.
I would be happy to do it anytime. Just let me know, and I thank you for letting me come on.
All right. Well, take care of yourself. I appreciate the time, and I look forward to having you on soon.
Talk to you later.
All right. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.